Well, since I had to take this thing apart, what I was doing was I was taking screws out so that I could do the file work to get the wood right down to metal. And went to take the bolt out, the main bolt that goes through from the two tangs, goes from the top tang down through to the bottom tang, and twisted the head off. And that really didn't surprise me any. I knew that there would be some glass bedding that went down into the ferrule a little ways and stuff, and kind of would make it tough to get out. So it really didn't surprise me that I twisted the head off on it. But what I wanted to show you was, because I used a ferrule, and because I used lots of release agent on the inside of the ferrule and on the bolt itself, even with the head twisted off, I was able to just take a punch and drive it on through and get it to come loose. So not too big a deal. I'll be able to grab a hold of it with a pair of pliers, back it out of the threads here, and be able to use a different one. But this is one of the reasons I use fit-up screws and do this, and I don't countersink any of this stuff until I'm ready to start really shaping it right down to the final finish, is because you have things like this happen, and if I hadn't used a ferrule, if that had been a wood to screw fit, bolt fit, I probably would have never gotten it out of there without drilling it. But because of the release agent and the ferrule being in there and being able to break the release agent loose, I was able to drive it out without causing any damage or without having to drill anything. Since I've got this all apart, since I did have to take it apart to get this out, I might as well show you the glass bedding job. Hopefully there's enough light here you can see this, but it's just a real thin coat in there. You can see even where it's so thin through some of this that it did coat the wood, but you can see the wood being lighter showing up there in some of those spots. But it's a real nice glass bed job, real nice and solid, no pockets or bubbles or anything in it, so turned out real good. And of course it's got those two little pins sticking up, the glass bedding that raised up into the grip cap, so the grip cap will go back on exactly where it came off of this way. So I'm going to put this back together now and go back to sanding on it. But I wanted to show you that those things do happen, and if you do things right and you prepare in advance, usually doesn't cause too much of a problem. This way I can just replace the bolt with another one and go right back to work. But like I said, had I not put a ferrule in there, had I not used a good release agent and done it properly, that would have been a real bear to get out of the wood. It would have been a real tough job to drill that through and repair that. So just something to think about if you're ever doing something like this. So I finished shaping this up. Got the cheek piece cut in here, and got the recoil pad installed. Couple things about this. When you're doing these, if you can't freehand this shape or whatever shape you want, there's a lot of different styles of cheek piece. This being a primarily English looking gun, this went with a pancake style cheek piece, which is typical English, and of course it's got a shadow line around it. If you can't freehand this, if you're not very good at drawing these things by hand, a set of French curves works really good. You can get this shape with a couple different sizes of French curves and get really nice even lines that way. Cutting this in isn't that big a deal. You can do it with some chisels. Or the other thing that works really good to cut this in and to really bring it down to a nice fine edge is round files. You can take this down to a nice curve with round files and work right up to your lines. The shadow line, the easiest way to do that is with a flat file actually. Take a flat file and a couple different sizes and cut it in with a file and just keep working it down until you have the nice shadow line built into it just with file work. Recoil pads. This one was customer spec. He chose this one. He's got it on at least one other gun I know of, and he seems to like it on that rifle as well. This is a Packmer decelerator. It's one of the largest ones they make, both length and for thickness. Wouldn't be my first choice. This is more of an American style. It's got the weave on the back of it, but it's the same dimensionally as the one that I prefer. On an English gun, Packmer actually makes an English style recoil pad that's solid black and it's got kind of a leather grain on it. I kind of prefer that one, just personal preference. But they're both the same thickness, they're both the same size, so either one of those works good on a gun this size. And this still looks very nice. So, customer's choice on this kind of stuff, and this is a very nice recoil pad for this gun. So, just personal choice, I would have gone with the English in my own, you know, for my own rifle if it was mine and I was building it for myself. When you're installing one of these, they rarely, if ever, just fit on there. And so when it comes to shaping this to get like the angle down here or around the top to match your comb, easiest way to do it, best tool in the world to take these down like this is a 12-inch disc grinder. Works really good, gives you a nice clean edge, doesn't tear things up, doesn't tear up the rubber. Best way in the world is 12-inch disc grinder. But not everybody owns one of those, so there are other ways to do it. You can trim it off with hand tools and stuff like that. But if you got a 12-inch disc grinder, best way in the world is to get it mounted up and then roll it. Use your 12-inch disc grinder and roll it right up onto the stock. And if you're real careful and you practice a bit, you can do it without ever gouging into the wood. So works real good. Next step is to start inletting the final parts on this. And where I'm going to start for today, and it shouldn't take me too long to do this, this is pretty quick stuff to inlet, but where I'm going to start for today is with the escutcheons that go on the outside of the key. And these are just a real simple piece. They're just an oval, and I'll have to open them up just a little bit to fit this key, and I'll use the key right in place to slide it down on there and mark it. And then I'll just inlet the little bit of thickness, and it's not very thick, goes in really quick, and then put a couple temporary screws in and hold it in place. So that's my project for right now. This morning immediately would be to get these in, and then after that the next thing to inlet is the back action locks. And that's actually pretty much the last of the inletting, is to get these locks on there. And that'll require a couple multiple steps to do that. Starts by putting I'll actually have to start by shaping the lock to match where it's going to sit right here in this corner. And then I'll inlet the lock plate, and then I'll just keep adding pieces to the internals of the lock and inletting each piece of that. So I'll show you how that goes as we get farther along. But like I said, the first thing to do is these escutcheons on each side for the key, and they're a real simple inlet. They're just a real simple oval. Same thing with every part. Draft the edge a little bit. For these, I'll have to open them up just a little to match the key, and just slide them on there and mark it and inlet it that little bit. The easiest way to do the layout for the escutcheons is to get your escutcheon fitted so that it slides over the key really well, and then take some Prussian blue, dab the back of it really good, slide it down on there, and then just press it down a little bit, and you can see it leaves a nice clean imprint of the Prussian blue, so it makes it real easy to figure out exactly, you know, where you need to take wood out. So I've got this first lock plate in. It's a little bit of wood sticking up here, a little bit of metal sticking up here, and of course it'll have to be filed to fit right here, so metal to metal fit is perfect. But a little bit of file work will take care of any high spots in the wood and the metal. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip this over, and I'll get the other lock plate inlet, and then I'll go ahead and drill and tap for the bolts that are going to hold the lock plates in. The reason I'm going to do that is because when I start inletting these other parts, I want to be able to suck it down to where it's supposed to be every time, and that way I'll be able to inlet all the internal parts and know that everything's compressing and going in as deep as it's supposed to. So, but that'll be the next step, is get the other side in just like this one. So I got the other lock plate in, and it's pretty much the same deal. A little wood, it's high in a few spots, a little metal high in a few spots. Once I get it drilled and tapped in both places on both locks and get the bolts through, then I'll be able to do a little file work and take this down. But mostly I just want to get the bolts and stuff drilled and tapped through and put through it, so that as I start inletting it, I have some guides that'll pull the lock down straight in every time, and that way I'll be able to inlet the internal parts and get everything centered and straight and know that it's true. Basically, there's two ways to inlet the internals on a lock. One way is to basically just take out all of the internals and just leave the outside shoulder. That's kind of the fast and you know, hog it out version. The best way to do it, though, the way that really gives you the most support and leaves the most amount of wood and the most structure, is to actually individually inlet each internal part, leaving just enough clearance for the part to work properly. You know, enough movement for your springs, enough movement for your tumblers and sears and stuff. And that takes a bit more time because everything has to be radiused and contoured and inlet one piece at a time to make it match the internals of the lock. So that will be what I'll get onto next week. This is pretty the end of the week. It's been kind of a short week because I had some other obligations to attend to, but I'll get onto that next week. The hours on this week were really short, but I did work on that third lock. You'll remember that third lock that I built at the same time that I was building these two. I did work on that project because it is going to the same customer, and so that other lock got worked on a little bit this week as well. No pictures of it, obviously, because it's not part of this actual build, but anyways, that's the end of the week, and next week I'll start in by drilling, tapping these and getting them bolted in place, and maybe I can do a little file work, get them cleaned up, and then I'm going to definitely start inletting the internals next week. So that's where I'm at.